Yeah, that's not good, is it? Imagine this, a fictional work you love is getting adapted into an anime. This work can be a manga, it can be a manhwa, it can be a light novel for the four of you who actually read those. It can even be whatever the the beginning after the end is. It's not a manhwa, by the way, it's not Korean. Point is, a work you love is finally getting adapted. That's exciting, right? At last, the masses, those peasants whose opinions matter less than yours, will get a taste of what you have been raving about for months and months. You aren't worried about the adaptation not looking good. The source material is immensely popular and has a large fan base. There's no way the anime won't take advantage of that, right? Surely the anime won't mess it up, right? Right? And then, bluelock happened. Anime adaptations being mediocre is an extremely frequent occurrence. I'm talking multiple times each season frequent, and for a medium that predominantly consists of adaptations, that's a massive f***ing problem. There are so many shows out there that do the absolute bare minimum. All these shows do is convert PDFs and JPEGs into MP4 files, or to PNGs in case of Tibet and bluelock. They don't have anything to offer outside of simply existing, but we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's take a step back, let's try to understand what a bad adaptation truly is, and by extension, let's define what a good adaptation is. Why? Because trust me, there's a lot of nuance to this whole thing. The goal of this video isn't to blindly dunk on shows like Tibet and Sakamotodays and throw a few surface level insults at them. There's a pretentious in my channel name, not a reviews. It's very easy for us fans to look at an adaptation at face value, quite literally. The way a show looks and sounds is often the only metric people look at. And while yes, production value is an important part of an adaptation, it's far from the only one. If I were to use an unnecessary food-based analogy here, I won't of course, but if I had to, I'd say something like, if an adaptation is a pizza, production value is the cheese, very important, yes, but not the only metric that matters. In my opinion, the following four factors collectively decide whether or not an adaptation is good. Keep in mind, these only apply to the adaptation component of a show, not the overall quality. A great show can be a terrible adaptation and vice versa. The four factors are production value, faithfulness of the visuals, faithfulness of the story, and pacing. Let's get the obvious one out of the way first, production value. It refers to any aspect of a show that's not the story. This includes animation quality, direction, music, and everything in between. It's also the aspect I love obsessing over the most. I won't talk much about this component here because truth be told, it is very simple, and it's the one you guys know a lot about already. High production value good, low production value bad, it's not rocket science. I have covered this topic in detail before, by the way. I recommend checking this video out if you want to hear me nerd out and explore in granular detail the topic of production value. Long story short, strong animation and drawings help an anime tell its story in a more optimal manner, strong direction makes a show more visually engaging and thematically richer, and good music use can enhance a scene to unparalleled heights. Again, high production value good, low production value bad. The second factor is faithfulness of the visuals, and you might think it's simple too, right? It's just like the previous aspect, more faithful good, less faithful bad. No, if you think that, you're part of the problem of course being the fact that most adaptations tend to be dog shit. To quote myself from a few years back, there's nothing more boring than an anime that uses the manga as a storyboard. A manga and an anime are two completely different works of art, and as such, there's no reason why one should look like the other. I hope that's not a controversial thing to say. By the way, I'll focus more on manga adaptations here because manga is the most visual source material medium out there. The way most manga adaptations, especially the lackluster ones, work is by taking a page from the manga and doing absolutely nothing with it. Just recreating the shots as is with some movement here and there, that's the norm. And I think it's fucking stupid, I cannot stress this enough. One-to-one adaptations annoy the fuck out of me. You know those social media posts you occasionally come across, the ones with captions along the lines of Studio XYZ really snapped with the scene and it's just an anime recreating a manga panel? Yeah, those make my blood boil. Oh look, they just copied a shot composition from the manga. They are doing justice to the source material. off. That's the level we are at. Shows are praised for being less creative. Think about it for a second. The less creative a show is, the more it's applauded. It's absurd. Here's my 2 cents on the subject. I don't want my anime to be the exact same thing as the manga. Regardless of how well paneled and illustrated the manga is, I would much rather have the anime do something different, even if the something different is not as good. Why? Because at least it's different. But hey, aren't we talking about adaptations in this video? Even if I don't like one-to-one recreations, aren't they good from an adaptation POV? No, at least I don't think so. You see, manga will always be limited in what it can visualize. At their respective bests, a medium that's restricted to stationary panels can never visually outdo a medium that actually moves. Therefore, by lifting short compositions from the more limited manga, an anime is automatically killing its potential. It's not being as good as it can be. Also, we can't just assume that a manga is perfect. There are plenty of major titles out there with less than elegant paneling and artwork. When adapting works like these, the anime team can increase the technical proficiency and by doing so, get the message of the manga across better than the manga itself. That's very much possible. Mob Psycho, for example, it's one of the most visually impressive TV shows ever, and it retains that poorly drawn aesthetic of its source. Huge air quotes around poorly drawn, by the way. Sadly, stuff like that rarely happens, and that's not a good thing. Here's how I'll put it. Blatantly refusing to visualize a story better by making use of the more versatile medium of animation makes a show a bad adaptation, in my opinion. Keep in mind, the goal of an adaptation is to tell the same story as its source material. It's not to recreate it as is. Some of the best adaptations out there take creative liberties with the visuals. Those immensely cool hyperdynamic ODM gear shots from early Attack on Titan were obviously a significant upgrade from their corresponding manga panels. The mind-melting audiovisual experience that was Sukuna vs Mahoraga heavily expanded upon the contents of the manga. Fights from the recent solo leveling anime are a lot more diverse structurally than their manhwa counterparts. Those haunting rumbling scenes from the penultimate AOT episode were largely anime only, the list goes on. Anime is at its best when the team looks at the source material as nothing more than the starting point, a platform to build on. Also, why would you want an anime to look the same as the manga? It doesn't make sense to me. Why would you want the same thing twice? The manga still exists, just look at it instead. Let the anime be its own unique thing. This also applies to the artistic side of things. Think of it this way, a mangaka might be great at what he does, but the anime is made by a completely different team of artists, and these people will not have the same artistic vision as the mangaka, of course. Again, they are different people. Consequently, the team has 2 choices. 1, look at the manga as nothing more than reference and create the anime based on their own creative ideas, and 2, simply imitate the mangaka's vision. I don't know about you, but I'd much rather have the former. Wink wink Chainsaw Man. Taking artistic cues from the manga and recreating an iconic panel or 2 is fine, but basing the entire visual identity of an anime solely on the manga is stupid and counterproductive, in my opinion. In fact, I'd go as far as to say I prefer adaptations that look radically different. I wish we got more of those. Overall, when it comes to visuals, different is usually a positive adjective. The third factor is faithfulness of the story, and this one should be a no-brainer, right? Surely the story of all things should be faithful, right? Not exactly, in my opinion. I think story-based changes can be a good thing. And that might sound confusing. Didn't I say the goal of an adaptation is to tell the same story as its source? And by that logic, shouldn't strict faithfulness of the story be a good thing? A change in story might make a show better in a vacuum, but won't it make an adaptation worse? After all, adaptation isn't about the overall quality of a show, it's about the way a source material is translated and handled by the anime. Isn't a change in story counterproductive to that goal? Not exactly. You see, when I say stuff like change and lack of faithfulness, I'm referring not to a major overhaul. Instead, I'm referring to minor alterations, maybe an additional line here or a small omission there, maybe a small amount of scene rearrangements, that stuff. The idea is to not be overly faithful and make minor changes here and there in an effort to make the story more focused and the storytelling more optimal. You're still telling the same story, you're just telling it better. Demon Slayer is a fantastic example of this phenomena in action. The most recent season of it adapted a tiny arc from the manga, meaning most of the anime was filler, and that's the best thing about it in my opinion. The additional stuff Ufotable added helped build the calm before the storm atmosphere the show needed, it fleshed the characters out more, it made the product more compelling to watch. Demon Slayer is filled with changes like these. The team deciding to remove a lengthy explanation of Uzui's ability right smack in the middle of his intense fight against Gyutaro, them adding an anime original Infinite Castle scene near the start of season 4 to build intrigue, the list goes on. Again, no source material out there is perfect. An anime with the power of hindsight can alter stuff in a manner that makes the story better, all while preserving the original narrative. Here's another example: the final episode of Attack on Titan, or more specifically, the final conversation between Armin and Eren, was heavily reworked and expanded upon in the anime. I believe Isayama himself wrote part of it. This still conveyed the same idea as the manga, it just did so in a more fleshed out manner. You get my point, right? Small changes like these can be, and often are, beneficial to an anime. This, however, can be a slippery slope. It is very easy to f up an adaptation with these minor changes. An example I love revisiting is the first season of Classroom of the Elite. The final scene of the final episode, the People Are Tools scene. It completely annihilated the credibility of this show amongst audiences with a mental age of over 10. It turned what could have been an extremely unique character drama centered around a compelling protagonist, that's what the light novel is, into a show that's loved exclusively by kids with stunted emotional development. The scene, however, wasn't anime only. Ayano Koji said those exact words in the novel. The difference was the context. In the novel, he said those things while the special exam was still ongoing. Winning seemed to refer to the exam, and tools seemed to refer to his teammates. A bit cheesy, yes, but sensible for who he is. The anime, however, in an effort to end on a cliffhanger, changed the sequence of events such that this scene took place after the exam, which made it so much more childish and edgy. These were all minor changes. What about major ones? Well, they usually tend to be bad. The more significant a change is, the more it causes the adaptation to stray away from the original story, which is just bad adaptation 101. Tokyo Ghoul Route A, for example, it was anime only and it sucked. Even if it was good in a vacuum, it wasn't, it very much wasn't, trust me, but even if it was, it would still be bad from an adaptation POV. The good kind of changes are the ones that conserve the original narrative and message, all while improving the quality of storytelling. Any change that causes a show to move away from the original story is a bad change, at least adaptation-wise. The final aspect that determines the goodness of an adaptation is pacing, and it too is immensely important. A show might feature high production values, it might feature the right kind of changes, but things can still go to shit if the pacing is out of whack. The God of High School, for example, fantastic show in terms of quality, but someone thought adapting 100+ chapters in 13 episodes was a good idea. It wasn't. That same critique applies to titles like The Promised Neverland Season 2 and Fate Heavensfeel. The latter is one of my favorite things ever visually, but god is the pacing awful. To put it in perspective, Heavensfeel as a route is longer than Unlimited Blade Works, but the latter needed 24 episodes while the former only got 3 movies or roughly 9 episodes. The consequence? A story that felt haphazard and confusing, crucial scenes being cut and mandatory explanations being presented in the form of overwhelming expositions. Moral of the story? Good pacing is an important part of an adaptation's quality. There is no universal way of pacing an anime, it depends on the show and the genre in question. A slice of life might benefit from a slowed down pacing, same with a show that's too heavy-handed with its action. On the other hand, a long-running shonen might require a faster, more compact presentation. More about the topic, pacing is more important in an anime than any other medium out there, at least in terms of scene-by-scene progression. Think about it, while reading a manga or a light novel, your own reading speed comes into play. You can rush through the chapters or take your time and really absorb each panel and line. An anime, however, decides the rate of progression for you. That is, of course, unless you are one of those low-life, scum-sucking morons who watch anime sped up. Sidebar, if you watch anime at anything other than the original speed, you need to be flogged in public. Point is, anime has a definite length, and as such, it is particularly important for it to pace things with the audience in mind. I'll go back to that Demon Slayer example. The Swordsmith Village arc slowed things down to a crawl, and I think that was brilliant. The slower pacing did all of the things I said it did. I don't remember the list. Here's another example. The Days with My Stepsister light novel featured a slow, methodical pace. It was part of the charm, and I can absolutely see why a production team might want to speed things up. But thankfully, director Sota Ueno did not. The Days with My Stepsister anime, one of the best directed shows in recent memory by the way, featured the same slow pacing as its source material, and that's the reason why it was so good, that and the direction. Long story short, a good adaptation needs perfect pacing. If the pacing is too slow, the anime might feel boring. If the pacing is too fast, it might come off as cheap and unremarkable. The team needs to find the middle ground. And that's all there is to an adaptation, broadly speaking. As you hopefully realize by now, there's a lot more to it than simply copying the source and making it look pretty. Justice is truly done to a source material not when it's copied as is, but instead when it's enhanced and presented in the most optimal manner possible. And that should just about do it. Like the video, check out this other bit of content on screen, like and subscribe, and until next time.